Hello, boys and girls. It's early again. Sorry, we're an hour ahead again. But this is the last time we will be an hour ahead for the foreseeable future. That said, it does mean, where are we? That certain people in Japan can now be online. Isn't that exciting? So we've lost probably a load of Pacific people, but or other Pacific people. We've gained a load of Eastern Pacific people. So, is Japan the Western Pacific or the East? Doesn't matter. Either way, we're going to spend the next hour in that program again, Capture One. So we're going to we're going to be editing your photos, not mine, your raw files that you've sent in over the last week, or possibly the last few days. I put out a rallying call for some new raws. And you delivered. You came up with some very weird and wonderful raws that we'll try and cover today, as many as we can. But it does mean that obviously those of you that are used to 3 o'clock, you've been a bit shocked and surprised. But Paula's made it today. Well done. And Paula's bragging as well because she ended up with book number 1. Sorry, everyone, on number 2, 3, 4, 5, down to 50. But if you want to go and grab number 1, you know where she lives. So let's and actually, another announcement: Tony's not here, but is able to communicate from the middle of a wood to tell us that he's not here. You don't get a star for that. Not a gold one, not a silver one, nothing. Right, let's get on. So Capture One is this program here up above. In the version that we're in today is 16.6.6, so that's just a reference point for you guys. If you're on the version 15 or later, most of the stuff that we're going to cover today is perfectly compatible and will work quite normally. Ray, you made it. Was it Ray made a mention? No, it wasn't. It was Ian. That the release notes for Capture One 16.6.6 have been updated to say it's been tested with macOS 26. So we're on 16.6.6. We've also, there's been a release of Tahoe 26. It's either 26.1 or 26.01. I don't know how big they want to make the issue. But we're on that, and I'm still seeing some issues. So I personally, if this is a mission critical system that you're running, I would still wait on a little bit just in case. But your choice, life's about them. Make good ones. Right, Capture One is the piece of software that is written by the clever guys out in Copenhagen in Denmark, and it allows us to take the content that your sensor recorded onto your memory card of all the light that came through your lens, and it allows us to take all that content and change, alter, improve, or correct the detail that it remembered or recorded. The problem being there is a disconnect between what our brain sees through our eyes, because that is interpreted, and what a camera captures as raw data. Now, some of it is because our eyes are frankly a lot more powerful than even the best camera sensor in the world, in that sense, in terms of something called dynamic range. So in other words, how bright and dark can you see at the same time? So as a result, the camera has to compromise sometimes, or our settings have to, whereas our eyes generally don't. Also, our eyes are interpreting things through our brain, and it's our brain that sees things through the lenses of our eyes. A camera, in theory, unless you're putting on things like film simulations, which is still you doing it, but a camera does not interpret when it's saving raw data. It is literally saving the light that hit the sensor. So sometimes there's a disconnect, as I say, between what we remember and what we recorded, and we use things like Capture One and others, but not on this channel, things like Capture One to recover or repair or correct or whatever you want to use, but basically to get it back to what you remember seeing. And that's the goal of these sessions. So we are not inputting floating unicorns across a star-filled sky with Aurora in the middle of the equator. We're not doing that. Use AI for that. Enjoy. We're getting things back to real, back to what you remember, and back to a feeling that you tried to capture at the time. So, some questions. Yeah, for those of you that are online, do question, heckle away. We like that. Those of you that are in the future, or if I was in your past, please do put comments in down below, and we'll try and comment or try and cover any questions that you have. But if you're live and online, the advantage is that you can ask questions. We'll cover those in a second. One of which being, where are we? Any concerns with Adobe including Google's Nano Banana as an AI option? I have concerns in general about AI being included surreptitiously in images. You'll see a lot of competitions out there now for photography that are banning the use of AI. I'm on that page, to be honest. AI has a place. I like some of the stuff that AI does. It's a time saver. We use it for certain things, but we don't use it to pretend that that was what was really there and that was what the world was. I think that's a very dangerous path to go down. Adobe have clearly staked their camp in the AI world. That doesn't make me like them particularly, but equally, Adobe is one of the tools that I use, or the Adobe Suite is one of the tools that I use the most. So, be careful where you want to fall on that argument, but use the tools that you want to use. If they include things, and Google's Nano Banana is fantastic at some things, others not so much. But either way, it's down to you in terms of what tools you use. And remember, you can disable a lot of the AI stuff. Capture One, for that matter, have made a point, and they made a point at the next Capture event, that all the AI within Capture One will not be based on sending data up to their data centers. It's all done effectively locally using local software routines, and it's using your data to do work with, and they train only on their own content. They're not training out on the stock sites and trawling books for free content and all the other stuff. But as I say, up to you. So, a couple things before we get going. Number one, the latest masterclass. We ran it on Sunday. Where were you if you weren't there? Those that were there got a bit of an insight into how we shoot architecture and interiors and geometric stuff, and how we fix perspective, how we don't fix when something's too far wrong, and how we plan for it, basically. If you want to have a look at that masterclass, it's there. You can download, you can watch, and whatever for forever in theory, but you'll be able to do that using the link down below. For those of you that want to send images in, it's there. So paulreeferlive.wetransfer.com. Go there, upload your raw, send in any notes you've got, include your name, no play, very simple. And for those of you that want to keep discussing stuff, it's all in there. And what's also in that Facebook group, you'll find the link again down below, is our monthly competition. Isn't that fun? So this month's, we're actually a day early because it's still the 30th of September, but I'm taking the Japanese/Australian route, which is it's the end of September. September's gone, over. Runners up. There we go. It's a bit of a weird one here because we've got two from Carlo. But anyway, runners up on our theme of giant. Forgot for a second then. Let's just pull David Grover up. So, Tony's shop. Huge spider, little spider. Quite like that one. This one down here is Alan's. It's actually graffiti of a bird with a real shopping trolley in front of it. This one and this one are both from Carlo. And interestingly, what all these pictures have got in common, it's funny, going through some of the images. In order to make something giant, I have to have some sort of comparison, right? Talking about perspective in a masterclass. I can't get a sense of scale unless I've got something that either is recognizable or I've got some sort of comparator, I guess, visually to be able to work out that scale. And what the winning, or what the runner-up images do, and certainly what the winning one does, is gives us a comparator. So I can see that something either feels giant or feels tiny or whatever else, in comparison to something else. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, just taking, if I took a picture of literally a giant, if they exist, apparently they walk among us. But if I took a picture of a giant and there was nothing else in the scene, it was just a portrait, it would just look like a person, right? I need a picture of a giant next to a normal size human, or whatever, a church standing on top of its roof or whatever, or what was is it Godzilla? No, it wasn't Godzilla. King Kong? One of them. Anyway. We digress. Let's go on to our winner. So, well done, Tony, Alan, Carlo. They're very good shots. But in my opinion, this one from Michael was just the better one. So, well done, Michael. You get the bronze shiny Grover, the Grofy. You don't really. No one's actually won that thing. We will get it made one day, and we'll do a special award, maybe for David. For those of you that don't know, David Grover is one of the Capture One guys. Anyway. Interesting, isn't it? Giant as a theme, but using a macro lens, getting up close, getting into I think you said the persimmon seeds or something like that. No, it wasn't. It was something else. There was a word. It began with P, I'm sure. Peony. That's it. It's peony. It's a flower. It's not a seed. Anyway, these ants come and open them up, apparently. I thought they opened up on their own, but evidently the ants give them a hand. But one way you can make something giant is by getting in close, macro lens, really, really focus it quite carefully, effectively. You'll find these are pretty deep apertures in reality for macro lens. You're not going to be able to focus stack a moving ant, let's put it that way. So you're going to have to go with what the lens can give you. But good job of making that ant look giant. Well done. As I say, Brophy, well done. Well done, Michael. For those of you that didn't get a runner-up or a win, try next time. You know where to do it. Go into the Facebook group, upload your pictures. Right, all that said, let's go into Capture One. And we said last week we would start with Edwin's image. So we're going to do exactly that. This is the edited image. So one thing I would just flag to you all, when you're sending in images with adjustments, sometimes this goes wrong and I'm not sure why, but anyway, let's have a look. Export, when you go to export original files, it's the key thing. If you do the normal export, it's going to export a flattened file, so whether it's a TIFF or anything like that, and I'm not going to be able to get hold of the raw. I'm only going to be able to see your final output. If you click on export original files and you go into here and click on export as EIP, what the EIP does is it bundles up the raw file with all of your adjustments and it puts them into effectively a zip archive. It's not more clever than that. But effectively that compressed archive then comes across as one package. So when I load them into Capture One here, even though you've done them at your end, we can see all of the adjustments and the original raw file, which is the key thing. Now, this is the same thing that we'll do if we're going to send to a retoucher, or if I need to share files with, for example, David Grover. We will send him an EIP, because it means that they can see at the other end all of the different adjustments and variations you've done. If you've got more than one variant, so remember it's only ever one raw file, but let's say I've got this one and this one, imagine they were different, it doesn't matter which one I click on. If I click on any of these and go to export original files, it will include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter, but it will always include all the variants of that one raw file. Where are we? Paul, I'm investigating pixel shifting with focus stacking. Don't think my Mac M1 Mac. To be honest, it's funny, isn't it? We've moved on quite a lot in quite a short period of time, but I remember going back to, and some of you will remember this, when we first did the original testing of both the original M1 Mac or MacBook, and then the Studio, and then the MacBook Pro. In certain scenarios, it didn't beat, but it certainly kept up with what I had at the time, which was a monster of a Mac Pro tower with 192 gig of RAM, and it had the afterburner cards. It had it had everything that you could load up on it. And the M1 series were keeping up with it. Granted, it wasn't going to necessarily win in certain speed tests, but certain ones it did. So I'd give it a go, to be honest. See what it can do. The 8 gig thing is a bit of a red herring to a certain extent. So what the M1 series and M2 and 3, M4 and so on, what they are very good at doing is running at something really fast. And Capture One is an application that relies on using processors that can run at things very fast. In the early days of the M series, I was getting very frustrated because it wouldn't use all of the cores. It wouldn't push the performance as much as I'd effectively bought in terms of the equipment that we were using. Now it's better at that, but the M1 is perfectly good, and I think you'll be okay. You might not be as fast as you want, but give it a go. See what happens. There we go. Paula, still got M1 MacBook Pro. Don't feel the need to upgrade. If you let's put it this way. If you're not having to keep up with it, then you don't need to upgrade. If it is struggling to keep up with you, well, yeah. But that's choice. So let's have a look. Now, the advantage, as I say, of sending me the EIP is we can see everything that you've done. In this case, Edwin's got a load of layers. We like layers because layers mean when we make changes, not only can I just turn them off and on to see what's happened, but we can also adjust their opacity, and that's a key thing in Capture One that a lot of people don't necessarily use. So the advantage of doing things in layers gives us that ability to effectively increase, or well, not increase, you start at 100% opacity, but decrease the amount of an effect. Now, what some people choose to do, here's a fun one, and actually styles we do this. So if you were to apply a style, so we have a style backward elevation, and if we were to apply, let's say, golden hour highlight reduction, click that, you will notice that when it goes in, the layers go in at 50%. And the reason is, so what we've effectively done is amped up the style, because some people wanted more of it, some people wanted less. So what we do is we put the layers in at 50% opacity, so that people that want to whack it up, so let's go to the warm tone element of it, we can warm it up a lot, or warm up the warm tones a lot, by pushing it beyond 50. You go up to 100, it becomes quite putrid. But depending on the scene, I mean, this scene obviously started pretty warm anyway in the first place, but depending on the scene, you might want more or less. So taking that theory in mind, what I see quite a lot of people do, and I find it a little bit of a time consumption, but I get the logic. If I'm going to create a new layer, a new filled layer or a masked layer, the first thing that I see some people do is knock the layer down to 50%. So what it means is that any adjustments I make here are only half represented in the output, which means that later on, if I come back, so let's say I did some clarity, some structure, a bit of dehaze. Let's even cool it down a little bit. Let's put a bit of a curve in there, drop the midtones. Okay. But now if I want to do some more of that, I think, yeah, that's nice, but I want more of it. Well, traditionally, I'd have to go into, if this was at 100%, I could have to go into every single tool now and up them a little bit more. Or, because I only put it in at 50%, I can just do that and go up to 100. So I'm not saying one is right and one is wrong. Personally, I edit at 100 because I'm more likely to back it away than I am to increase it. But it's a viable way of doing things, and a lot of people do it. So do consider it. Now, that said, all of these layers really useful, and the fact that they are labeled and named is quite useful. So we'll run through them. Let's go back to our image layer. So the image layer on this one, Edwin's already put in a little bit of change. There's a highlight drop and a contrast drop. There's nothing much more apart from a little bit of vignetting. So it's just darkening those edges. Now, interestingly, if I go into here, so this doesn't have the light fall off applied to it. So what I find quite interesting is we pay a lot of money for lenses that don't have vignetting. It's a very modern thing. We don't. If you're looking at classic cameras, classic lenses, film cameras, and whatever, one of the beautiful parts about it is that fall off, not only in terms of sharpness, but also in terms of light. So there is this light fall off function within Capture One that fixes the edge of an image to lighten it up effectively, because we know that, and on here you won't see it so much. I'll show you on another image, hopefully in a second. But we know that lens is slightly vignette. So when I see on the base, this sort of vignette pulling in, I smile because I like it as a style. I like it. I like darkening the edges, but just bear in mind that if you want something that is truly correct, flat, left to right of your image without any darkening at the edges, use that light fall off function first to get to what the best of that lens could be with the lens profile that's either made by the manufacturer or made by Capture One, and then start to apply any changes outside. So image layer, as I say, not doing a huge amount. Let's just check on the color tab. There is a custom white balance in there, so let's just see what that was before there. Oh, it was very cold. So it was 5562. It's been warmed up to 7204. Well, and this is on the base image layer. Now, all of those adjustments, if you'd made loads of adjustments on the base image layer, you would right click here and you'd say move image layer adjustments to a new layer. And that gives them to you on a new layer that you will need 100%. opacity to work with. But in this case, they're left down there. That's fine. I'm not too worried about that. But what we can see, though, is that the image layer itself, just before and after, most of the change has been to warm it up. Okay. Then we have the tree. So the tree is effectively a bit of clarity. So a bit of contrast, up the saturation a little bit. We've got a little bit of shifting a hue, which is interesting. So taking it from cyan to be down there. Okay. And then not actually using clarity and dehaze. So I would argue, possibly, there's our tree mask. I mean, it's not the neatest mask, is it? It's got quite a lot of spread. I think this is possibly through either the use of the Luma range or refining it too much. If I was going to be picky, I would actually go a little bit rougher with this. Just go, yeah, we'll use this one here and not that one. I would go and just clean this up a little bit by getting rid of some of this background stuff. Because this is a color shift as well, it's going to be affecting stuff out there too. So let me so grayscale mask, Option and M or Alt and M on Windows. And I'm just going to clear up all of the background stuff, because if we are doing color shifting, I don't want it to affect things that aren't my subject. I'm being very specific about my subject having a color shift. Then let's be specific. Let's not have it creep. But we do want it to creep to the right stuff. And that right stuff being our leaves and all of that stuff, which comes from refining it. So as I refine it a bit more, it starts to spread out to all of the edges of those leaves. And I think that's what happened here. This was just too much of a refine. It's gone too far. I would pull it. So what I've done is I've shrunk the scope of it, and then I'd pull it out a bit more into the spindly parts of the leaves. There is also a Luma range on here. I'm not sure exactly why. So it's to avoid the brightest parts of the tree, but I think our refine already does that. So I'm not sure of the benefit you're getting of the Luma range, but okay. But what I would say is all of that shifting and stuff. So the color shift, I'm just going to remove that. These here, I'm going to remove. I'm just going to match the position we're in here with the baseline one. And instead of all of those tools, look to use Dehaze. Because in one click, that's sort of done it. It's gone from there to there. If I want to warm it up a little bit, I could use my master color balance or even white balance on there. But rather than tinkering with all the different tools, if it is just a case of trying to get something to stand out a bit more and just be a bit more crisp and punchy, Dehaze is a good option. Those of you that have watched for a while know that I'm not a massive fan of the Dehaze function. There are other ways of doing it, and you can get a better result. But when I'm seeing just a reduction in a hue and a contrast build and a saturation build, those are the things that Dehaze literally does out of the box. And if I look at these two, I'm not sure that the Dehaze one is any worse or whatever, but it's only taken me one click rather than several. Background. So that is to lighten the background. Do I agree or disagree with this? I actually agree with it. If we're trying to look for contrast and trying to make something stand out, the temptation is to darken the background always. But what I'm looking at here is look at how dark the subject is. Look at how light the background is. Darkening the background is just going to make the subject fade more into it, right? So in this case, lightening it is the right answer. A foreground grad. And that is weirdly to bring up these plants, a little bit. Reduce, by the look of it, this yellow and actually shift the hue. Okay. And actually then cool down the foreground, weirdly. I am seeing some weird sort of shapes appear here. And that tends to be from where we're twisting color a bit too much. But I would sort of be, and funny enough, Rintara's on it. So if we want to make this more ethereal, potentially, just check the grad where it is. So press M on your keyboard to see your, sorry, not when you've double clicked it, to see where the mask is. I would potentially do a rehaze on it. So instead of using dehaze positively to make things clearer, we use dehaze negatively here, and we choose the tone that we want to add more of. And it sort of goes from there to there. So in other words, it's getting even softer. We're putting more fogginess in the foreground. That gives you the nice fall off. So yeah, I'd be a fan of that. Add some detail. Let's see where that is. Okay, that's in the trunk. So let's go without and with. Yep. A little bit of burning. So that's up there. And down here, I think at that point, I don't know whether it's necessary, but it's not doing any harm, so why not? And then a final one, a little dodge down here, so lightening those corners. But again, so we've added a vignette to darken the corners, and then we've got a mask that lightens them. My gut feel on this is that vignette is probably not required, but it's not doing any harm. Where I get to on this is I like the idea of pulling out these trees a little bit more. And I wonder, rightly or wrongly, a style brush called Deep Sky, built into Capture One. This will be too much. Yep. So, although, actually, I'm just painting it in very, very roughly. We might fix the mask later. But the whole point of this scene, right, is to demonstrate the contrast between those trees, and the background. This is too much, just to be very clear, but look at how ugly my mask is, so don't worry about it, because the whole point of what we just did, actually, in terms of that opacity, is that we can back this stuff away, right? And actually, having done this as well, remember, Option and M or Alt M, or go up to here, go to Display Grayscale Mask, Refine. So it looks and adds similar areas of the photo, texture, and removes the others. Now, that's too much, and I said that from the very beginning. So we use our opacity slider to pull it down. So we're going to add about a third of that. It's not a lot, but it just gives us a little bit more punch again, if we want to. It's completely personal choice in that sense. I get to a place where that foreground almost needs a little more saturation in order to pull it away. I think the background lightness also needs a touch more saturation just to keep it in step. Then I get to the crop. And I'm a fan of middle stuff, but also I wonder whether we can get something a little more interesting out of the shape of that frame by just giving it some negative space over here. So rather than having the two sort of smack bang in the middle of the shot, which again, it's pleasant, it's nice, I like it. I wonder whether we could get away with pushing one off to the side either way, just to maybe add a bit of interest. This over here is a bit annoying as a result because it wasn't in the original crop. So let's just use our healing brush tool. So up here, the little plaster sign, or press Q on your keyboard. That's healed out. That's healed out there. That's healed out there. Perfect. So I would get to there. The crop, as I say, is entirely your choice. You could even go, I don't mind actually the wide. There's nothing wrong with that there. It feels like a little bit like it's leaning. So I'd be tempted, even this may be perfectly straight, but because I've got a straight line here, in these flowers, just to twist that lean a little bit. Just feels like it's more level now in the foreground, because the foreground and this line and this yellow line here is what I see first. So I'd just be in a place of maybe use that line as your only level. The trees are wonky either way. So yeah. On the layers, yeah, Ralph starts his at 70%. Prasad at 80% or 85%. Doesn't matter. I just understand the theory of, if you think that you're a person that sometimes does something and then thinks, no, I want more of it, then potentially starting with 50% or 60 or 70 or whatever is a good move. Edwin, there was a stick that bothers me. Where's the stick? I can't see the stick. But to Paul's point, where are we? Maybe price 16.9. So remember, crops, I've got mine set to original, so which is the frame of the original camera. I can change that to any of the dimensions that are in here, but also remember, you can remember the 5x1 trend from this last week. That's in my system now as a stupid insta crop. Anyway, you can add an aspect ratio and you can put in whatever you like in here, call it whatever you want. But a 16:9 does tend to look a bit more cinematic. You're going to lose quite a bit of headroom. But yeah, remember, you can always add your own aspect ratios. And remember, you can always go back to the original crop dimensions. Sorry, losing my train of thought. So at 16.9, you're going to lose a little bit up top, but yeah, overall it's a lovely shot. The original is far too hazy, far too murky, far too cold, far too yeah. I like. But then equally, I don't have a problem with the original Edwin at all. I just think, if anything, I personally would like a bit more punch in that foreground. Right, let's move on to Ash's shot. Now, I don't know, Ash, whether the edits didn't come through, because I know this says edits on it. They didn't come through for some reason. What's weird is, when you go to export an EIP, it automatically includes the adjustments as part of that EIP process. So I don't know why they haven't come through. However, read the notes, get the challenge. So this is a relatively rare Aurora sighting of this tree. And the challenge being, well, number one, we need to cool this down a little bit, and we'll talk about that in a second. This is not going to be an Aurora masterclass, but there are certain things that we tend to do with Aurora shots. But two, the light from, I think you said your phone or someone's phone, is hitting this tree. What is that there? What an odd thing. It's like a... anyway, who knows? The light, whatever light it was, has unfortunately cooled down the tree. So as we cool down the sky, we're also going to affect all of that stuff too. She's using naughty words. Exported from Lightroom. The second file is the edit. It doesn't, unfortunately. They both have no edits, and that's probably because it was exported from Lightroom. You're not going to be able to get edits from Lightroom to Capture One or Capture One to Lightroom. There are tools out there that say they can do it. They typically miss stuff, so I would be really, really careful with it. So ideally, yeah, do it in Capture One. People are saying fungi. Weird. Anyway, I'm not going to focus on that. Let's fix this up. So, number one, this white balance is based on what it was shot at, which is 5994. The challenge that your camera has is it's always going to try and make the content of the scene, when it's on auto white balance, as middle grey. And what it tends to do at night is warm up the sky, especially with Aurora, because what it sees is a really, really cold set of colours, so greens and blues and all that sort of stuff, and it thinks, ooh, this can't possibly be right, so I'll warm it up, and that's what you get as a result. Typically at night, you're probably more down at here, so around the sort of 3000 mark, sometimes even lower, but you get to there, and that's done wonders for the sky, the Aurora. But I see now the issue down here, and you can too, which is the tree being illuminated by a colder light. Unfortunately, when we then pull down the white balance for the overall picture, that light gets sent even colder, and we end up with this weird space. So with that done, it's all right. See, there you go. Public apology from Ash. We should all learn from Ash. But anyway, no, you can use Lightroom. You can use DxO. You can use whatever you like. But it just means that, unfortunately, the edits don't come through when you send it through. Doesn't matter, because this is actually a really, really quick fix. He says this will go wrong now, won't it? Right. Number one, the light hits down here as well, and up here through the branches and into the trees. So the light has a bit of a fade, effectively, up there. As a result, the type of mask I'm going to use is going to be a graduated filter. So a graduated mask, gradient, a linear one. Just like a filter on a camera. So that means this applies 100% down here, 50% here, and nothing up here. Now the problem is I do need to get some of these branches in, right? So I'm going to spread that up further. And then I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key on the keyboard, and we're going to make it asymmetric. So it's easier to show you in grayscale. Out of the box, Capture One, it has a symmetric graduated. No, it's not. A symmetric gradient fill. The problem is we use them interchangeably. We mean a grad filter, but actually in software it's not. It's a linear gradient, but that's what a grad filter is. But it's even. It's like a soft grad. So 0%, 50%, 100% of the layers effect. If I want it to be uneven or non-symmetric, asymmetric is the word, Option key, Alt key, and pull it down. And you can see this still remains 100 to 50, nice and smooth fall, and then it rapidly falls off here. And what that means is that I can get the tree included and then rapidly fall it off when I don't need it anymore. And I don't really need it up here because that light hasn't quite hit that far. But obviously, if I start now warming that up, I'm also going to warm up the sky. Bad news. But I know that the sky, look up here, is 120, 130, 90, something like that. Whereas the tree is sort of 46, 47, 50. So we've got a lumen range. I'm going to turn my grayscale mask on and say, of my graduated, my linear gradient, let's get it right, I want to ignore anything that is brighter than the tree. So maybe there. So I've still got my fall off. Lovely. Now there's a problem because I might not have the right amount. So I want to keep this linear gradient editable. And the problem is what I'm about to do is going to make it uneditable. We don't like that, but I've got no choice. So at the moment I can edit it because it's still a linear gradient with a lumen range. I want to use the refine tool. In order to do a refine, it's going to want to spread out further. And when it does, it can't do that with the linear gradient. I want to use this shape. So now changing that mask from being something that's an editable gradient to being a shape, we click on rasterize. And that, you see the little luma thing has gone away. It is no longer editable as a gradient. Instead, it's now a physical mask. It's as if I've painted it. And it's got all the detail in, lovely. But I want to spread it. So I'm going to go to refine. Just like before. And we're going to go there. I don't want any of the sky to be included, but I do want this to be a bit more subtle on the tree. So hit apply. I can go to my normal paintbrush and include all of this foreground here. I could even, and this may undo what we've just done, but I could actually add in these branches down here. I don't want the stuff up here, remember, but I do want these branches down here fully filled. So I can go, oh, see, this is the problem with the AI brush. Sometimes it gets a bit keen. So I'm not going to do that, I don't think. Oh, will it get it? Yeah, it's not bad there. I just want the branches. Just the branches, nothing more. Okay, I'm kind of happy with that. But what it means is now, look, my warmth has hit the areas that I wanted and not the sky. So I'm going to say warm foreground as my layer. I can get rid of some of the green tint depends on how warm you want it to go. We could go to maybe there. I might pull down some saturation actually as well there. And now with the image layer, which is the overall white balance of the image, got to be really careful because I don't want to affect the tree now too much. But as long as I remember to undo everything that I do globally when it comes to the foreground, then I'm good. So in the case of the background, I do want to pump that saturation a little bit. Don't get it eye bleedy. Don't get too much. So single digits would be nice. Thank you. Secondly, we want to up some clarity. Why? Because we want our sky to punch a little bit. There's some movement in the stars there, and there's going to be a little bit of noise. We'll come on to that in a second. A tiny bit of structure. Be really careful with that because structure finds noise. If we dehaze it, you're going to get a bit more punch. But remember, this is applying to everything on the image. This is the image layer. It's everywhere. So as a result, I don't want this to be saturated, remember? So I now go to my warm foreground, and I'm going to undo even more saturation because that global layer will have affected the foreground too. This is a scenario where I would use a vignette pretty heavily. And maybe in that foreground, remember the vignette, by the way, applies to the whole image regardless of what layer you're on. So don't worry about where you're sat in terms of your layers. But this foreground almost needs to be a little bit brighter as well. So I'm going to use, because it's sat right in the darkest parts of our histogram. So if I expand here and look at where the little yellow or orange bar is, it's moving around the darkest parts. If I pull up shadow, we're pulling up too much. If I just pull up black, it's going to boost but not overdo it. So we quickly, and it is, if you think about the steps that I've done, it's a graduated filter, a luma range, refine it, split the white balances between the two, and then overall add some contrast, some clarity. We go from there to there. And that's what most Aurora shots involve. They involve cooling things down and fixing up the foreground, because as I cool things down up in the sky, we're also cooling things down in the foreground. Astro Edit had the base of the tree a bit brighter. We can. I'd just be careful with it. So, we can up, in fact, the exposure just to go there. If you're going to do that, I'm worried about the distraction down here. So I would then put in another linear gradient. Keep it straight and then just knock off that very foreground exposure. So the warm foreground here, we can pull up our exposure maybe half a stop. But again, just counter it with foreground grad reduce exposure. Just counter it, because having brightened up that layer with the tree in that much by, where are we at? 0.58 of the stop, so 2/3 of the stop. If I take this off, that foreground now becomes like you've lit it. It becomes distracting. So we want to counter that with the negative version of it. Noise. So there's a couple of things going on. Number one, we can see there are some hot pixels in there. The good news is most of them have gone, but if I go to our details tab, weirdly, on your image layer, it's pulled in your single pixel reduction, which wouldn't have been default. Strange. Anyway, so it did pull in that edit. Anyway, noise reduction, we can put in a bit more luminance reduction around here. On your background, do you want to pull in a bit of sharpening? Maybe, but if you are going to, this is too much. Remember, it's going to over sharpen your foreground. Again, it's in comparison. Your background is actually out of focus in this. Just one thing to bear in mind. A lot of the time we need to shoot at infinity. If you have got a foreground and a background at 28mm, you're going to struggle with infinity to get them both in. So I understand, but it does mean that your background isn't sharp. It is out of focus. But if I were to pull up that much sharpening, reduce the radius, reduce the threshold, we would get a reasonable output that's not too problematic. So yeah, we get to there. So it goes from there to there. And the interesting bit is this looks fine in terms of, apart from it's just a little bit too warm. But it's the second we do this change, when we pull this down to make the sky correct, or as we saw, then we see what's happened down here. And that's the problem for us. that we're effectively, that white balance change is affecting the whole image. The whole image includes your foreground and lighting. Yeah, that might be a problem. Um, would an intersecting mask work instead of the double gradient? It might do, huh? It'd be handy if we had intersecting masks. Um, but yeah, that's maybe an option. Right, let's just reset that. So that would be the comparison. I think that's a nice shot of the tree. It's great, but just maybe try and push the focus a little bit further back, because what I'm also seeing, Ash, is stuff down here. Look, in the very, very foreground is also still sharp. So you probably had the ability to push that focus a little bit further back, and you might have got the sky in a bit more. Um, yeah, there's not much we can do out here without introducing a load of noise. Okay, Ken. Simple question from Ken. I like the simple ones. Um, is this too much? Is this too saturated? I go back to what I said at the very opening of all of these sessions, which is it's got to reflect what you remember seeing. You made a point, which is I think it was like it just rained or whatever, so everything had become a bit more vibrant. And I think that's fair. So if that is how you remember it, I don't see the problem. If I look at this, the original, it's pretty saturated already. If I look at the greens, we're up in the hundreds, 116, so on, in terms of the saturation of that pixel, or the volume of green of that pixel, the brightness of it. In here we're no. There we are. So we're up to 150, 187, whatever, of green. It could be seen as a more saturated image for sure. What I would like to maybe do, so if we just look at these layers, so the image depth, that gives, I like this phrase, what does that say? Aggressive clarity and dehaze, love it. Right. So yes, this will give you a huge amount more contrast. If I take that off and take it on, so what clarity and, yeah, it is aggressive. So 75 clarity and 75 dehaze is basically crushing shadows, and generally the midtones is going to force them to decide to be either brighter or darker. It's not going to allow them to sit in the middle. So that layer there is really doing the heavy lifting in terms of making this image pop. Then on top of that, you've got the light green layer, which is quite and it is a pop. I would, if it were me, just clone this and create one for me to edit. If it were me, I would be tempted just on the light green color layer, this one here, to not lighten it so much. Go bluer would be my sort of gut feel. Not saturate quite so much. And to me, that feel, if you're going to go for a pop in a forest, there's clearly not bright direct sunlight hitting this. I'm not seeing hard shadows. I'm not seeing anything like that. So I'm seeing what would be either under a canopy or an overcast sort of sky. It feels to me like it would be a bit more muted. So if I go to the original there, so that doesn't have the pop, doesn't have the contrast, I get it. But this feels like it's been styled, whereas this feels like it's been amped. And I think that's the difference. So this to this is a pop. This to this is a grade. And what I mean by grade is it's a determined or a decided set of tones that we want to use for the shot. And I could go even further than that. So this is just on the main color editor for that green. If I went into my color balance and said, I'm going to move my shadows to be more blue, and maybe my midtones go a little bit warmer, not as much, and maybe my highlights go a lot more towards green, that there for sure is putting on a grade onto that picture. So this goes from being about, is it too much, to is it style that I like. Now, to Paul's point, and it's one thing that I'll always reiterate on here, this is about your personal choice, what you remember seeing, what you had there. To me, if I want this to feel like I'm sort of exploring on it, you've already added a vignette in there. I'd add a bit more, to be honest. I'd go to there because that makes it feel a bit more 3D in this sense, like there is light popping on the middle. So this does feel quite bright. If it was bright, if it was warm, and it was like this as you remember it, then stick with it. This is out of the camera. This is your processed version. This is a lot more muted, just to be clear. So if you wanted bright, happy, almost aggressive sort of thing in terms of light, then this isn't going to tick that box. But I can, of course, increase my levels. To start doing that, I turn my exposure warning on to make sure I didn't clip anything. So, 2, 3, 4, it sort of works. That's probably a bit too much. So I'd be maybe there. But this is just the difference. So there's your raw. That's been enhanced for saturation. There is quite a difference there. This has been graded for a style or a look. And there's not one right answer in those three. Is this one too much? I don't think so. Actually, comparing to there. And if it's what you remember, then go for it. This, to me, I think, as a print would be more interesting on a wall, just because I like those tones. But again, that's personal choice. So, yeah, there we go, Ken. It's actually a quick answer. Is it too much? Depends on what you saw. Right, Christian, speaking of grade, I love this. Not for the reason that you're going to think. The one thing I don't love, Christian, I wish you'd given me a bit more headroom up here. Just a touch more. I get the reads, but it just feels like this stops too suddenly. And I've gone to the crop. There's no more up there. Yeah, just 2 degrees, 3 degrees. But what is nice in here, and this is Christian's effort to mimic Kodak film. So if I show you the original, perfectly fine as a raw. But Kodak, and there's lots of film styles out there, but the Kodak look, as it were, for this particular style of film, did have high contrast. It was crushed shadows, actually, to a certain extent, but it always had a warm, slightly saturated tint to everything, slightly yellowish tint. So let's just deconstruct this. So on the image layer, not a lot going on, apart from, in our advanced color editor, we've got a warm segment here, which actually isn't doing anything, and that sort of threw me for a second. So I'm like, why is that there? And I think it's because we then worked out that it would be done later on, maybe, in the color balance area, because I think it's in your global layer there. Yep. So the color balance in this has been shifted significantly warmer out towards the orange and more saturated. And down here in that little triangle, we now have a subtle adjustment to adjust what was orange to be more yellow. This goes more yellow. This goes more green. So down at that sort of minus 8.7, I think it was, or something around there. Fine. That gives us a little bit of everything that was already warm is now more yellowed. And then add to that the fact that the color balance, master color balance, and this is the key thing. So beforehand, we were doing, in Ken's shot here, we're actually splitting these. So if we look at our color tool down here, so our highlights have gone towards the green, the shadows have gone towards the blue, the midtones have gone warmer. So effectively, we're pulling different directions. So you've got a split tone, effectively, between darks and lights in the image. In this shot here, so Christian's shot, it's the opposite. Everything's going warmer, and that gives it that nice sort of Kodak-y feel. The sky is interesting to use deep sky on this image. So deep sky actually doesn't necessarily saturate too much. It does. There isn't a saturation change. But what deep sky predominantly does is, by nature of its words, it deepens the color of the sky, and it brightens the color of the clouds. So if you actually look at it, if you were to pull it apart as a brush and look at the adjustments it makes, because it's all exposed, you'll find that it actually takes whites and makes them brighter, makes the highlights brighter, takes the blues and makes them darker, not necessarily more saturated. It can but it makes them darker and deeper. So in this context here, there's not actually a huge amount of blue up in the sky. We see it as blue, but if we look at these numbers up here, it's not skewed heavily towards blue. 128 red, fine, 149 green, 167 blue. That's not bright blue happy sky, is it? It's muted. So using the deep sky brush, it's going to pick on those blues. It's going to pick on the bits of the blue that it can grab, but it's just going to darken them, deepen them. And in the context of the rest of it, it just gives it that muted feel. And then this final layer here, just to lighten that up. Michael, on the 16:9 crop, I'm not sure. I'll tell you why I'm not sure. I already feel like I'm being bashed in with a ceiling that's coming down on me. I don't want to make it feel more cinematic, but maybe it will offset. I mean, it makes it less foreground heavy. I'll give you that. So that's the same crop as the camera, effectively. 16:9. Does it work? Maybe. I think a huge thing that might help is in a pixel editor, just picking out this extra bit of tree-ness, and maybe playing with that. Imagine you had a hedge trimmer, not for real, but but yeah, as a style, please, guys, and this is why I actually was really pleased to see this one. Seeing people emulate their favorite film stars, and then hopefully saving that style. So right click, save adjustments as a style, or a style brush, but in this case, because it's a film simulation, you do it across the board. I think it's a nice way of playing with your pictures. Because let's take this for an example. Right click, save adjustments as a style. We're going to take all of that stuff apart from maybe, no, actually we'll stick with all of it. Apart from white balance, where are we? There. It's one of the reasons that we try and do stuff in color balance if you can. Save it. We're going to call it KDK, just so I remember not to keep hold of it. So that's taken the adjustments. I could actually take that style and give it to someone now in my file system. That's fun. But let's take, for example, let's go back to Edwin's shot from the variant. Do you see how normal this now looks and how faded the original now looks now that you come at it fresh? Interesting. But if we take that style, KDK, I can now Kodakaize Edwin shot. Now it's too much, right? Too much. But remember, I can always back it. I can back it off. Why is it not? Oh, sorry, let's get rid of that. Right click, apply to a new layer. Please remember to do that, because it means that going in at 100, I can back it off to maybe 50, and then I've got a Kodak feel to my other shot. It's quite useful, right? So just remember, when you're playing with one image, if you look at a style that you've managed to create, and especially one where you're thinking, right, I want to do a film simulation or something like that, like Christian's done, you can then take everything that you've done, as long as you've done it on one layer, two. Actually, you can take more than that, but you can take all of those adjustments, right click, save adjustments as a style or a style brush, and then you can save them into your bank of stars, which now, as a result of Capture One Cloud, that can be transferred and moved around between different machines and so on. Or you can go into your file system, copy that file, the style file. It's going to be confusing. Send it to someone so they've got access to the same styles as well. You can create a style pack. How do you think we make styles? So the more time you spend getting a look that you like, think about how can I reuse this in the future without having to start from scratch, and the way is through styles. You could, of course, use match look, but it's not the same thing. A style takes from wherever you are a move that's known. Match look takes wherever you are some unknown moves to get to something similar to where you wanted, which is a different thing. It leads to certain inconsistencies, or it can do. Oh, there we are, Rintaro. Can you also, can you not use matchlook? Yes, you can, but it won't come out the same. I'll show you. Actually, let's show you. Matchlook. Let's load in Christian's shot into matchlook. And let's go to Edwin's trees. So this is the one that I just did here with the style. Let's clone that variant, the original one. And this version, I'm going to use matchlook. I'm not going to adjust things. I'm just going to use it pretty much out of the box, because we can always back it away, create it on a new layer. What's wrong with my jaw today? Weird. Hit apply. Boom. So as a style, matchlook. Style, matchlook. So, of course, the match that we can pull back, just the same as the style, we can get to there. But you see how heavy it's gone. And the reason it's gone heavy is because it's not taking everything and applying the same adjustments to what we did in the original file. What it's doing is it's trying to match the overall tonality of this shot, of that matched look, or the matched file. And if I go to here, this started out so faded and pale, effectively. Let's just put that back to 100, what it thought. It's trying to match this to that, and it's just too much. So, of course, you can back it away, but even backing it away, you don't get to the same place. I like that as a shot. There's the original. Well, not the original. That's the one that I've just edited. That's the version with the style applied. That's matchlook, even at 30%, even if it's going to a 50%, it's just too much because this is so much heavier, and it's trying to take that one to be a heavy one. So there we go. Right, girls and boys, I think we're done for today. So we've got Edwin's trees. Like those trees, Edwin. Maybe play with the crop a little bit, but yeah, be a bit careful with the masking and maybe use a bit more contrast and depth to make it stand out. Ash, this one is a relatively easy fix. It's a normal thing with Aurora, especially where you've got foreground lighting. The worst one is when something with a red light, brake lights or whatever, lights up your foreground. That can be a real pain. Ken, this shot, it's purely down to your memory. If that's what you remember, then it's spot on. I would personally play with it a little bit, but that's your choice. And Christian, building styles that match film simulator or film looks lovely, but just remember to reuse them. Don't just use it on one shot. Save it as a style, and use it on other images. Why not? Right, as I say, for those of you that missed it, Masterclass on architecture and geometry and perspective and stuff is in the description down below. For the other ones, if you've missed all the previous ones, they're also down there on the same page. You can still access those. For those of you that want to join in next month's competition, you can do that through the Facebook group. And don't forget, this month's competition winner, well done, Michael. There's your trophy. Look after yourselves, everyone. We'll see you not next week, but maybe the week after. One way or another, we will be back. Between now and then, send up your files. We'll catch you then. Cheers. Bye bye.